Story 1. Am I an a-hole for telling my parents that either I move out or they do something about my brother? I, 24 male, lived with my parents in a very expensive city in a 3-bedroom high-rise. My mom decided she wanted to move to the city because she was tired of living in the country. I agreed to move with them because the city had many software engineering jobs, so I landed this really good job that pays a lot. I'm making 6 figures now. Both my mom and dad work as school teachers, and when you combine their incomes, it's just a bit less than what I make. Meanwhile, my brother Ethan and his wife Olivia were originally living in our old state. But when Olivia found out she was pregnant, my mom and dad extended an invitation for them to move into our house. I work from home sometimes and pay 75% of the bills and mortgage, so the spare bedroom was my office. Ethan and Olivia showed up at my house, which I didn't know about, and demanded my room. My room has a walk-in closet and bathroom. I told them to take the upstairs because it has an air mattress for guests, but my parents told me to let them have my room. I reminded them how I pay most of the bills and I'll move out if they have my room. My mom yelled at me and told me I was a jerk, but my dad just told them to go to their room. I went to the office the next day but forgot my laptop. So during lunch I came home and found Olivia taking my stuff out of my room. It was one of those moments when everyone else had already left for work. I ended up raising my voice and asking her, "What on earth are you doing?" She screamed back saying it was my mom's idea. In the heat of the moment, I grabbed the few things she had moved and threw them onto the floor. I made it clear that when I returned from work, I'd be kicking her and Ethan out of my office, out of the room they were using. My brother blew up my phone when I was at work, and my dad started a group chat and said that there will be a family meeting when everyone gets home. As I was taught to grab a knob with a lock for my door, my parents, sister-in-law, and brother were sitting on a couch when I got home. Ethan tried to get in my face, but I'm taller and bigger than he is, so I just put my hand on his face and shoved him out of my way. I knew this infuriated him because he's older than me. My dad told me that I should just let them have the room, and Olivia smiled at me. I told him that I pay most of the bills and they are living under my roof because my name is on the mortgage, and if they want the bigger room, they could either pay my rent or the 4 of them can move out. My dad tried to bargain with me, but I told him I'm not talking about this anymore. It got even more tense after that. I made it clear that if I heard anything about it again, I'd kick everyone out. Olivia started crying, and I just went back to my room. My dad seems to be handling things all right, but everyone else is avoiding me. I thought things might have settled, but the next night when I came home for dinner, my mom had cooked for everyone except me. She said she wouldn't cook for me until I gave up my room and started acting like a good son. My dad agreed with her. I paid for every grocery, so I went into my room and printed eviction notices for my brother and sister-in-law. They had been there long enough to be considered squatters. I told them they had an hour to pack and get out or I'll call the police. Then I told my parents they have 30 days. I'll take legal action. All our extended families stay in a different state, and they don't have the money to support 4 people in that city. My mom begged and tried giving me her plate, but I said it wasn't about the food. My parents put my brother and sister-in-law in a hotel room, but denied them, and my mom tried to apologize, but I ignored her and went to my room. I'm writing this right now to see what I should do because I'm honestly confused. Am I a hole now? For the top comments before reading the updates. Your mom just decided to ask your brother and sister-in-law to move into the home that you pay for and then decided to play games? Well, the 4 of them can just move back since they can't afford this city on their own. That was such a silly attempt to take control. It's time for you to have your own space. Mom tried to use the "if I don't get my way, I won't cook for you" card, but it backfired when it turned out he could manage cooking himself. She doesn't have to stay at his place anymore. She tried to withhold the one thing of value she brings to Obi, having to share his home with 4 people, and they wanted this to committee office. The best thing is she was cooking everyone else meals with food he had paid for. The audacity of that blows my mind, right? Like she's already a notice had it pays for everything, and she still tried it with this. Not the agent. I'm guessing the parents and brother thought they had autonomy over you because you're the youngest. Your actions have proven they don't. Your mother though, wow. It's good that you didn't hesitate to put her and your brother in their place. Otherwise, this could have dragged on to them railroading you. Sounds like they're all taking part in a real-life sitcom. If they end up without a place to stay because of their decisions, that's on them. They're all grown-ups, right? Making big choices, reaping the results. It's a classic golden child scenario without even saying so. I mean, he could have played this passive-aggressive like mom, but I'm glad he didn't. Though I suggest he buy no food for the house for the rest of the time they stay there. In fact, start interviewing people throughout the room. In fact, if you have friends that your parents don't know, do a mock house showing and let them know how much the room's fronting for. I'm always happy when these situations meet the parents and entitled siblings, and about my mom kicked me out when I was taking care of her. She's disabled, paying the bills, maintaining the house, etc., because I made my sister mad by setting a boundary. Sister moved in, now the house has a hot mess. My mom hasn't had a home-cooked meal in years, and my mom has told me more than once how she misses how I did everything. I've told her I'm never doing that for her again and plan on moving overseas. She had a gem in you and didn't appreciate it. You understood your value and didn't let them disrespect your cause and your boundaries. I love this for you. Live your best life overseas. Now for the update. I went to work, and my parents had left before me, which was unusual. It's tricky when family problems come up. Mom texted me a bunch of sorry messages during the day. I've read some comments that say she's narcissistic, but this was the first time she said sorry, and it stung because of that. When I got back from work, my family was there. Brother, his wife, mom, and dad, all sitting together. Dad spoke up saying they were sorry for what happened. They kind of expected me, the one they see as the calm voice in the family, to just forgive and forget. My brother had a request. It seemed small, and because I have a perfect life, giving up one thing to accommodate him in his time of need is what family does. Side note. My brother has no doubts. My father is a veteran, so we were able to get free education somehow. But because my brother changed his major 5 times, he had to pay for 3 years of extra coursework that wasn't covered. My parents took on that burden and are in debt because of it. They also didn't sell or rent out the old house because my brother convinced them that he would like to start a family there someday. So they have some doubts because of it. But my brother is not in need of anything. My brother also told me that because it's our parents' condo, they should have a final say. I told him clearly that this condo is mine. My name's on the mortgage, so they don't have any say in how things run here. He seemed baffled, thinking I couldn't afford this place on my salary. He mentioned someone making $50K a year couldn't possibly live like this. I had to explain that I make 3 times that amount, and the truth is our parents can't manage to live here without my financial support due to the mortgage on our family home and his student loans. Dad took care of his student loans, and that the old house was already paid off. I looked at my parents wondering why they lied to him, but I explained that they're in a ton of debt because of him and refused to sell the house because of what he said. James asked our parents why they didn't tell him all of this. Mom burst into tears, telling James they knew he was jealous of me since I was in high school. When Mom knew that me playing varsity football my freshman year of high school when he rode a bench as a senior is what started his dislike, and me playing college level at a Big Ten school didn't help. We also graduated the same year, so James told Mom that it wasn't fair that I got to do all those things. Mom and Dad started treating him like a child to make up for it so that he wouldn't dislike me. They hoped our family could still spend time together without any bad feelings. James left without saying anything else. My sister-in-law said sorry and mentioned she didn't realize it was my house. I asked her, would that make any difference? She ignored my question and went to the classroom. My dad tried to explain that they felt like they failed my brother as a closet just because of the football thing. It was because James wasn't given the same opportunities as me. I explained how James kept school to drink and smoke and trying again. I asked, do you think they should have gotten the same opportunities? My dad said it was hard to explain. I told him, what's easy to explain is the eviction notice, and he has 30 days. So I left my friend's house, and that's where I'm at now. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. Am I a hole for harming out of my father's house after finding out he's reconciled with my mother? I, 21 female, was raised by my father, 48 male, alongside my older brothers Lyle and Kyle, both 24 male twins. Mom left us shortly after I was born, so I've never really had a maternal figure growing up. I've tried to ask my dad why mom left, but he would always try to dodge the question. Anyways, this kind of messed me up a little bit as a kid because I would always blame myself for leaving. It was really tough growing up because my older brothers would constantly blame me for mom leaving, especially during my middle school years. It made things really confusing and difficult, even though my mom expressed wanting to reconnect. She never really took the time to get to know me. Her intentions were kind of up and down over the years, which made things even more complicated. So that woman broke a lot of promises with me and my brothers. The last straw for me was when she didn't come to a beauty pageant I'd been excited for months. I know that sounds really petty, but at the time it was really important to me, and she swore up and down that she would come. Of course, she broke that promise too. So when mom called to apologize for not coming, I let that woman have it. I think the call almost lasted an hour and a half, and it was mostly just me cussing her out. Obviously, ever since that phone call, I've been no contact with her. But a few days ago, my dad texted me if I wanted to have dinner with him and a voice saying that he was going to make my favorite meal. Of course, he agreed. I went to his house and I hear my dad and my brothers talking. Nothing unusual, of course, but then I hear a woman laugh. So I walked to the kitchen and saw my dad, Lyle, and Kyle laughing and talking with my mother. So at this point, I'm mad and confused, and I think I thought out loud because I said, "What the heck is she doing here?" So everything goes silent right away. Dad starts telling me to watch my tone, and all they want to do is chat about their future. I'm there like, what future? And then my mom decides it's the perfect moment to reveal that she and dad got back together months ago and have been dating. Total bombshell, right? I think you can understand how groups I lost from this information. But then Lyle tells me that basically everyone in the immediate family knew about the relationship besides me because they were worried about how I would react. So I'm still standing there shaking with rage. So when my dad tried to grab my arm to sit me down so he could talk, I snatched it back and basically stormed out the house. Now I've been bombarded with texts from my dad and Lyle saying I was immature and made mom cry. The friends are 550 on it, so Reddit made a home, not the a-hole for how you feel. They blindsided you and then blamed you for your reaction. If you choose to have nothing to do with your mother, you shouldn't have to. But realize your father is an adult free to be involved with whomever he chooses. I know he's a grown man, but I just don't understand what he sees in her. She literally left him with 3 kids to raise all by himself, but now that they are all grown up, she wants to come back. This whole situation just has me in a tizzy, to be honest. I still love my dad and brothers, but what they did hurt a lot. Before, what they did was pretty tame compared to this. They tease me about my fashion choices, which was nothing compared to what's happened now. It might have been easier if my dad had talked to me one-on-one. The fact that they all kept it from you is very inconsiderate. I'm sorry. I've been there in his hands of being left out or always the last to know. Be strong. Thank you. I just feel so upset and confused with them right now because they never kept anything like this from me. Usually, my dad addresses matters with all of us. Now for the update. So before I get into anything, I just wanted to thank everyone for the kind words and reassurance. I wasn't really expecting it at all. I also want to apologize for the late response to everything. I've been busy so much with work and other things that I just haven't had time. Anyways, with your guys' advice, I texted my dad and told him that I wanted answers about what the heck was going on. He wanted to host the dinner, but I felt he lost my trust after trying to corner me. We had the dinner at my place instead. My friend Jess, who is trained in martial arts, was there for safety during the dinner. Things got emotional, and Jess started crying, asking for forgiveness. He kind of went on about how he just wanted us to be the family that we were 20 years ago, the family I don't even remember. And to let you guys know, these were definitely not crocodile tears. So I hugged him to calm him down, but I had to put my foot down and tell him I wanted answers, not tears. He calmed himself down a little bit and explained everything that I asked him. Mom was very young when she got together with Dad, with a significant age gap. They started dating right after high school graduation too. My mother had a history of drug addiction, something I had suspected. She overdosed once, and my dad had to rush her to the hospital. That's a lot to handle. Firstly, I was an unplanned baby, and when my mom was pregnant with me, my parents put her in rehab. After I was born, She left and went to Florida, leaving things difficult. Recently, she's gotten her life together, got a job, and wanted to apologize to my dad. They've rekindled their relationship and decided to tell my twin siblings before me. It was nice to have this information, and I thanked him for it, but I asked him why didn't she apologize to the kids? It was hard to borrow constantly, of course. He started to backpedal, saying that I just needed to give her a chance to prove herself because the twins may already have. I added it was a really horrible move not to even mention to me that mom was back, and I had to explain to him that I have given another chance way too many times, and that she destroyed that bridge beyond repair. But I did tell him that I wasn't going to cut them off for it, but mom was just going to be the new woman, and that we needed to go to therapy without mom before we continued anything. When I shared this with my dad, he was a bit upset, but he agreed that therapy was a good idea and said he'd inform Leland and Kyle. I let the twins know Carla's situation, but Lyle was angry. He called multiple times, sending me hurtful messages, basically calling me a spoiled brat who needs to move past the past. I gave him a piece of my mind before I blocked him, and we've been no contact since. We also had our first therapy session, and it wasn't groundbreaking. It was just kind of like an introduction type thing and kind of addressing what we want to work on. I showed the therapist my post when I was alone with her to give her more context because I can be scattered brain at times. She says she definitely wants to go deeper on my feelings about my mother alongside my father and brother, as if possible. I hope the therapy helps. That sounds like the most positive outcome anyone could have hoped for. To be honest, especially mom. You definitely owed a huge apology from her. It strikes me to not be so hard on your dad. It sounds like Lyle might have seen how deeply hurt and affected dad was when Carla left, and he probably saw dad's love for her all this time. I feel happy for dad in that sense. Every family member sees and experiences things differently in a situation. I'm sorry your dad couldn't explain it better. Your leaving wasn't because of you, though. It's so confusing for a young child and can have a big impact without the right words to explain. Thank you. It's also been helpful during this situation to see dad's side of things. It makes me put things in perspective, but at the moment, I just can't bring myself to have anything to do with my mother. And it also didn't help that Lyle went ape on me as well. I'm just hoping everything falls into place in the future. Now on to the next story. Story 3. I smacked my older nephew for putting his hands on my daughter for violation reasons. I will not be mentioning ages because Reddit deleted the first post. Just know my daughter is smaller and younger than my nephew, so my husband and I have a nephew, Ed, who has out of nowhere experienced a dramatic personality change. He usually is a sweet and happy person, but for the past couple months, we noticed that he's been having more violent tendencies. I'm not talking about a little shove here and there. I'm talking about punching and trying to hurt people with objects. He was suspended from school for 2 weeks for throwing a chair at his teacher. My husband and I had been talking about it and have expressed to each other that we think Sil and Bill need to think about getting him into therapy, but anytime we mention any advice towards the kids, Sil gets defensive. This past weekend, everyone was at my Mill's house for a barbecue due to her leaving to spend the holidays with her mom in Mexico. Everything was going good. The men were grilling, the women were chatting, and the kids were outside playing on the trampoline and jungle gym. I was talking to my Mill about Christmas plans when I heard my daughter scream. Looking out the window, I saw my nephew trying to force my daughter off of the jungle gym. Without thinking, I came out my heels and began running towards where they were at, not noticing my husband already in front of me. Just as my daughter lost her footing, my husband dove and was able to catch her. My nephew had come down the stairs, and when I looked at him, he was smirking. And without thought, I charged towards him and shoved him back. I was screaming at him, but I can't remember all of the words that were coming out of my mouth. My Sil shoved me away from him, and I shoved her back harder, causing her to fall down. I told her she needs to get him some help, and before I could say more, my husband was pulling me back towards the house to get our stuff. When we got home, I got the full story from my daughter. My niece and daughter were playing on the trampoline when my nephew got on and began playing rough and caused my niece to fall off. My Bill screamed at him to stop, and he proceeded to lay spread eagle in the middle, preventing them from playing how they want. They decided to just get on the jungle gym, and as my daughter was swinging on the monkey bars, my nephew grabbed her legs and tried to pull her down. She proceeded to kick him in his face, and he let go. That's when she went back to the top to slide down, and he proceeded to drag her to the edge and throw her off. My husband said he understands why I did it, but I should never put my hands on anyone. A part of me feels bad, but the other half doesn't care because he tried to hurt my baby. Edit. I just wanted to clear a couple things up. 1. My daughter was not left unsupervised. Her dad, uncle, and Mill's boyfriend were all outside when this happened. 2. My nephew has been known to him but never have he once went that far, but I totally agree with the comments saying I shouldn't have had him around her in the first place. 3. We have suggested therapy to my Sil and Bill multiple times before this event took place, and each time she got defensive and claimed he was going through a middle school phase. 4. In the post that was deleted, I did mention that we would be going LC until he gets therapy. Update. After work today, the adults decided to meet up at Mill's house to hash everything out and talk about what happened last weekend, and honestly, I can't say I have good news. My nephew is currently in a behavior facility due to him trying to choke my niece after an argument over the game. I cannot describe in detail what happened because of how disturbing it is, but the police were called and he was immediately taken. I have apologized to both Sil and Bill for putting my hands on their son, and they've apologized as well. A lot of tears were shed, and we are all just trying to come together with what we can do for my nephew. It is currently Christmas break where we live, but they do plan on having a meeting with all of his teachers, including both principals. After talking and discussing his behavior, we believe that he may be being bullied at school. Despite what a lot of you might believe, my Sil and Bill are not abusing their kids. They adore all of their kids. They are unfortunately just the type that fails to see a problem until it's too late, which I have mentioned they need to work on. I have been helping Sil look for child therapists that can begin seeing him immediately when he gets home. This is the last and only update. Thank you guys for the great advice. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Caught my future mother-in-law laughing with her friends about how she landed a simp son-in-law and is set for life. Made her realize she won't be able to leech off me. I, 32M, am getting married to my fiancée, Deborah, 31F, next month. We have been together for 2 years and I just asked her to marry me last month. I'm head over heels for this wonderful woman and can't wait to spend the rest of my life with her. We come from very different backgrounds. I grew up in a working-class family and I'm the middle child among my 2 siblings. We always had to work hard, living paycheck to paycheck every month. Deborah, on the other hand, had a much more comfortable upbringing. Her dad was a successful businessman, so he could provide her with everything. She was always surrounded by wealthy kids who threw extravagant parties and events. I put in a lot of effort to work my way through college and eventually landed a job at a prestigious company. My parents were truly proud of how I had built my life without ever depending on them to provide me with financial assistance. When Deborah and I met for the first time, it was at a mutual friend's party. Although we knew we were worlds apart, we still had an instant connection. We started going on dates, taking the time to truly understand each other, and with each passing day we fell head over heels for one another. Once we started seriously dating, Deborah eventually invited me to one of her family's dinners so she could formally introduce me to her parents. That's when I had the pleasure of meeting her dad, John, a successful businessman, and her mom, Maggie, who was a dedicated stay-at-home mom. For the first time, John seemed to appreciate the effort I had put into building my life. Maggie, on the other hand, didn't seem to take a liking to me. It was quite evident that she looked down on my upbringing, and I didn't fit her expectations for the kind of son-in-law she had in mind. Her disapproval of me was far from subtle. It was painfully evident. She didn't hold back in making it clear that her only child deserved someone she considered better than me. She would often cut me off in conversations, and her disapproving glances spoke volumes, making it a challenging and awkward situation to navigate. In contrast, my parents couldn't have been more welcoming to Deborah. They embraced her with open arms, and my brothers took an instant liking to her. They would playfully tease her, telling her that she still had time to run away and escape from me, all in good fun, of course. It was heartwarming to see my family so supportive and accepting of our relationship. As time went on, I did my best to bridge the gap with Maggie, hoping to win her over. I understood that our different backgrounds and expectations might take her some time to reconcile. However, our interactions continued to remain strained, and I could sense her disapproval lingering in the background. Despite this challenge, Deborah and I focused on building our own world together, filled with love, understanding, and shared dreams. We were committed to nurturing our relationship even in the midst of these familial disparities. We held on to the hope that as time went by, Maggie might eventually come to accept and embrace me. Sadly, a year ago, John passed away from a heart attack suddenly. While he left behind substantial wealth, there were also unexpected debts that needed to be settled. Maggie had to make the difficult decision to sell her house and their car to cover these financial obligations when the bank came calling. Since then, she had to move in with us as she had nowhere else to go and has been living with us for the past 6 months. I didn't really mind having her live with us as I understood that she was going through a difficult time as she had just lost her husband. I tried my best to make her stay as comfortable as possible, but Maggie always found reasons to complain about things around the house. Just for context, Deborah and I have always shared our responsibilities equally since we started living together. Given our careers, we take turns handling tasks like cooking, cleaning, and doing the laundry. It's part of our routine. It's a way for us to balance our busy lives and support each other in every aspect. My parents had taught me to be independent from a very young age, so I love doing my share of the household work. Maggie absolutely despised this and would make her disapproval obvious throughout her stay. She has made subtle comments about how a man doesn't belong in the kitchen or a man shouldn't be doing household work. Usually, I don't take it to heart and I ignore it as much as possible. But over time, her comments have become progressively more hurtful and insensitive. I have talked to Deborah regarding this, and she agrees that her mother's behavior has been very difficult and hostile. Now, coming on to the incident, I was recently promoted at work. Hence, I wanted to do something special to celebrate this milestone with our family and friends. We decided to host a grand event, inviting our close ones. My to-be male also extended invitations to some of her rich friends whom she hadn't seen for a while, particularly after her husband's passing. While I'm not one to flaunt things, I entrusted Deborah with the planning, and she went all out with the party preparations. On the day of the celebration, our house looked great as the guests started arriving. Maggie seemed to be having a good time reconnecting with her old friends. My fiancé and I were busy hosting our own friends and relatives as the party was in full swing, and the guests mingled and enjoyed the festivities. I couldn't help but notice that my to-be mal's behavior had taken a turn for the worse. She had a few too many drinks, and her comments started to get more and more inappropriate. She was bragging about how expensive everything around the house was, particularly the decorations and the food, in front of her friends. It was becoming increasingly uncomfortable, and I could see that some of our guests were taken aback by her behavior. My fiancé and I exchanged worried glances, unsure of how to handle the situation. We attempted to stay cool as we knew Maggie had been drinking a lot since the morning. At one point, we ran out of wine, so I dashed to the nearby liquor store. When I got back home, I found my fiancé outside on the lawn enjoying her time with our relatives. I served them the drinks and then headed back inside to check on the rest of our guests. That's when I heard my mother-in-law loudly laughing as she chatted with her friends. I was about to enter the room when I overheard Maggie mentioning my recent job promotion to her friends and went on to describe how she had been living at our place for several months rent-free. All because I was a naive person. She laughed as she continued to say that she had finally landed a simp son-in-law and pointed out that I had been covering her expenses throughout this time while she lived rent-free in my house. Her words stung, and I was taken aback by what she was saying. Her friends were all laughing loudly at my expense. She then went on to say that she was set for the rest of her life now that Deborah was going to marry me in a few months. My emotions were in turmoil, and I struggled with how to handle the situation. It was disheartening to hear these derogatory comments coming from someone whom I considered family, someone I had tried my best to welcome and support during a difficult time in her life. As I stood there in the hallway, grappling with a mix of anger, disappointment, and a sense of betrayal, I contemplated whether to confront her or wait for a more suitable moment to talk about this. My to-be male then told her friends that because I came from a low-income family, I would continue to be a hard worker for her, and she had nothing to worry about. At that moment, I couldn't hear her talk that way any longer and made a decision to walk into the room and confront her right then and there. I wanted to make it clear to her that she wouldn't be able to take advantage of me anymore. With a wine bottle in hand, I walked into the room, and everyone fell into an awkward silence when they noticed my sudden arrival. Maggie's laughter ceased, and her expression shifted from surprise to a mixture of discomfort and concern. She was worried that I might have overheard the conversation. Pouring wine for everyone and placing the bottle down, I faced Maggie and began to speak. Maggie, I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with your friends. I stood there for a good 5 minutes listening to you talk about how you've used my perceived naivety to your advantage. I want to make it clear that I welcomed you into my house with open arms and tried to support you during a difficult time, particularly because you had just lost your husband. However, making hurtful comments like this in front of our family and friends and laughing at my expense is not acceptable. The room remained tense, with a heavy silence weighing down on all of us. I could see that Maggie was taken aback by the directness of my words, and her friends seemed equally uncomfortable. Just as the tension was at its peak, my fiancée walked into the room, a puzzled expression on her face as she tried to understand what was happening. As I stood in the middle of the room with Deborah now in the room, I went on to explain to her what her mother had been telling people about me. Deborah's eyes widened in shock as she tried to comprehend the gravity of the situation. Maggie's expression shifted from shock to embarrassment. I knew I wouldn't be able to forgive her for the way she had spoken about me. I asked Maggie to immediately leave my house. Maggie's eyes widened as she began to frantically protest, knowing that she had nowhere else to go. Deborah remained quiet as she understood how humiliated I had felt because of her mother. I remained resolute in my decision, emphasizing that I could no longer trust my to-be MIL to be living with us. I suggested she could find accommodation with one of her wealthy friends who had joined the party and were evidently relishing and laughing at my expense just minutes ago. Maggie looked around the room helplessly as her friends avoided eye contact, and I couldn't help but smirk. I had reached my breaking point and was no longer willing to be used and taken advantage of. In that tense moment, Deborah, who had been taken aback by the unfolding drama, finally spoke up. She addressed her mother with a mix of disappointment and determination. "Mom, you've put us in an incredibly uncomfortable situation with your behavior today. We've always tried to support you, but this kind of treatment towards my fiancé is unacceptable." Maggie, now caught between her daughter's disapproval and her own embarrassing behavior, began to realize the gravity of the situation. She had no easy way out and attempted to apologize, but I wasn't willing to be manipulated any longer. Still seething in anger and disappointment, I walked out of the room. The party soon ended, and my to-be MAL apparently left to stay at one of her relatives' places. Since the incident, I've been receiving messages from people with a variety of reactions. Most of the guests seem to support my decision to stand up for myself, but there are some family members from my fiancé's side who are telling Deborah that what I did was wrong and that I should not have humiliated her mother like that. My parents, who were present at the party, supported me 100% and had my back. The situation has caused a divide between our families, and the mixed opinions are adding to the tension, so I wanted to post here so I could get an unbiased opinion. Am I the a-hole for confronting my to-be MAL in front of everyone after I caught her making fun of me and letting her know that she won't be able to leech off me? Update 1. Thanks to everyone for your feedback on my last post. Many folks have suggested that this incident should serve as an eye-opener to the kind of family I would be marrying into. I have received suggestions that I should get a prenup with my fiancé before we get married, which I honestly never really thought about before, but after the recent incident, I'm seriously considering it. That day after the party ended, my wife and I had a lengthy conversation to discuss everything. While my wife is completely on my side, it's hard to deny that my trust has been shaken. It's not her fault, but I'm worried about her family and how easily they could manipulate me in the future. Many comments have pointed out that my mother-in-law's subtle mean comments for all these months were a form of emotional abuse, and I'm starting to see it that way too. I do not wish to have her in my life anymore. 2 days after Maggie left, she called my wife, who chose not to answer, so she sent me an angry text that read, "Adam, Are you happy now that you've separated me from my daughter? I've already lost my husband, and now I'm losing my daughter because of you. Yes, I used you, but isn't that what a son-in-law should do? Pay for his to-be mother-in-law's expenses? You could have bought me a new place when I lost my house, but instead, you forced me to live with you. You have more than enough to take care of my daughter, so it wouldn't hurt you to take care of me too. Her message left me seething with anger, and it was evident she felt no remorse for her derogatory remarks in front of her friends. I shared the message with Deborah, who promptly assured me she would address the situation and advised me to block her mother's number. It remains to be seen what happens next, but I feel emotionally exhausted dealing with this ongoing drama. Her mother's persistent unkindness towards me for no apparent reason, coupled with her unwarranted financial expectations, is really taking a toll on me. Update 2. Okay, everyone, here's the update you all have been waiting for. In the days that followed, Deborah continued to handle her mother's attempts at contact. She firmly explained to her mother that the situation had become untenable and that she had crossed a line. Deborah offered to help her mother find suitable accommodations but emphasized that the living arrangement with us had reached its limit. Maggie's responses ranged from anger to pleading. She continued to accuse me of tearing her family apart and causing her more pain during an already difficult time. I had blocked her, so fortunately, she had no way to reach out to me. As our wedding was fast approaching, I shared my thoughts and fears with Deborah, and she took it surprisingly well. My fiancé agreed that I wasn't wrong to have those fears in my head and told me that she was ready to sign a prenup so I wouldn't feel this restless and uncomfortable. I was taken aback by how understanding she was, and I couldn't help but feel guilty for having any negative thoughts about her, all because of her mother's actions. After that conversation, I felt much better about our relationship. We were starting to regain a sense of normalcy when Maggie unexpectedly showed up at our doorstep a few days later without any warning. I was alone at home when I heard the doorbell ring. She had come to confront me, and her accusations and anger poured out when I welcomed her inside to sit. Maggie claimed that I had ruined her relationship with her daughter forever, laying the blame squarely on my shoulders. Her words were filled with frustration and resentment. "You think you can just control everything, don't you?" she exclaimed. "You've taken my daughter away from me, and now you're trying to push me out of her life. This is my family too, and you can't just dictate what happens here." As the argument escalated, her accusations became more personal and cutting. She accused me of isolating her from Deborah and said that she deserved to be living with her daughter. I took a deep breath, trying to remain composed in the face of her accusations, and responded, "Maggie, this isn't about pushing you away. It's about preserving the peace and well-being of our family. Your actions and words have made it challenging to maintain a healthy environment here. I'm not trying to isolate you. I'm trying to set boundaries." I continued, "Deborah and I deserve to have a loving, supportive, and peaceful home. It's not about control. It's about ensuring that our relationship is respected and protected." At that point, thankfully, my wife returned from the grocery store, and I breathed a sigh of relief knowing that she could handle her mother better. She was visibly shocked to find her mother standing inside our house, hurrying to my side. She asked if I was okay, concern evident in her eyes. I nodded, morbidly relieved to have her presence beside me. Maggie, now directing her attention toward her daughter, accused me of trying to be controlling of her life. She said that she won't let me kick her out of the house and she planned to live here if my daughter was going to be here. She accused me of trying to divide the family apart since her husband had passed away. Deborah seemed pissed as she explained to her mother that after what she had spoken about me, she couldn't just expect me to forget about it. She reminded Maggie that she never even apologized to me for the harsh words she had spoken in front of the guests at a party that I had thrown in my house. Deborah reiterated to her mother that she was not entitled to live in my house just because Deborah was going to marry me. Maggie was displeased seeing her daughter support me, and it only seemed to escalate her anger. The room was charged with emotions, and I didn't want this to escalate further, so I asked Maggie to leave immediately, otherwise, I would call the police. Maggie's expression displayed a mixture of frustration and resignation as she clearly wanted to argue about this further, but thankfully, she decided to leave. After this incident, I am planning to take some space from Deborah and her family. I love her a lot, but I don't want to be stuck in a toxic environment like this forever. I guess I need to take some time to rethink our future. Update 3. It's been 4 months since my last update, and I know it's been a long time, but here I am. I am thrilled to share that Deborah and I are now happily married. Our wedding day went off without a hitch, and it was a beautiful celebration of our love and commitment to each other. We were surrounded by our closest family and friends, and the day was filled with joy and cherished memories. I know I had mentioned last time that I was a bit unsure about marrying her, but after some time off alone, I realized that she was nothing like her mother. As we had discussed before our marriage, Deborah did sign a prenuptial agreement, which gave us both peace of mind. It was a decision that helped ensure that our relationship was built on trust, respect, and a mutual understanding of our responsibilities. One notable absence on our special day was Maggie, our mother-in-law. We did invite her as I didn't want my wife to not invite her only living parent to witness our wedding, but Maggie chose not to attend the wedding. Her anger and resentment towards me from the earlier conflicts, which led to her leaving our home permanently, still lingered. I couldn't help but feel sad for Deborah, who had to navigate the difficult decision of having her mother absent on such an important occasion. Nonetheless, our wedding was a day filled with love and happiness. We were grateful for the support of our loved ones who celebrated the beginning of our journey as a married couple. In the days following our wedding, Deborah and I have settled into our married life, cherishing the moments we share together and planning for our future. We are excited about the possibilities that lay ahead, and we know that our love will guide us through any challenges we might face. Update 4. Married life has been going great so far. Deborah and I have been relishing every moment of our life together as a married couple. We find joy in the little things, from lazy Sunday mornings with breakfast in bed to sitting at home and reading books together. Our love has continued to grow, and we've become even more in sync with each other. We have embraced the various responsibilities that come with marriage rather smoothly. Recently, I have taken a significant step in my journey toward personal growth and family healing. Thanks to everyone's advice, I decided to start therapy, and it has been a transformative experience ever since. Therapy has provided me with the tools to better understand and express myself and the dynamics within our family. It has allowed me to address the emotional wounds and challenges that I have faced, especially in my relationship with my mother-in-law. With the guidance of my therapist, I have been able to communicate more effectively with my wife and work on building a stronger and more communicative relationship. Once I felt I was ready, we tried to reach out to Maggie, hoping to mend the rift that had developed between us. While it wasn't easy for me to reach out, I knew how much Deborah loved her mother, and I didn't want her to live her life without being in contact with her only remaining parent. We decided to invite Maggie to our home for dinner so we could all talk properly. Maggie had been staying at various relatives' places since the incident, and when Deborah first reached out with a dinner invitation, it took her by surprise. She seemed hesitant but also intrigued by the opportunity to reconnect with her daughter. She arrived at our home, and we cautiously began with small talk to catch up on each other's lives. Deborah was the first to break the ice, expressing her desire to see a healthier relationship between me and Maggie. She shared how much she loved both of us and wanted to see us get along. Hearing this, Maggie slowly admitted that her actions had been fueled by a sense of loss and uncertainty after her husband's passing, and that she had let those emotions cloud her judgment. She apologized to me for the way she had behaved and expressed that she didn't understand at first how much she had hurt me. I could see that she seemed genuinely sorry about the incident. The conversation continued, delving into the hurt feelings on both sides, the misunderstandings that had occurred, and the steps that could be taken to mend the rift. It was an emotional and honest discussion, marked by tears and heartfelt apologies. Deborah played a crucial role in facilitating the conversation, acting as a bridge between me and her mother. By the end of the evening, amidst a wonderful dinner, there was a sense of relief and optimism in the room. While the wounds of the past hadn't completely healed, the foundation for reconciliation had been laid. It was a promising start on the journey toward rebuilding the bonds that had been strained for so long. Since the evening, we have continued to meet Maggie during other family events, and there is no longer any awkwardness. Our relationship has gradually improved, although I will never feel comfortable enough for her to live with us again. I remain patient and understanding, knowing that healing will take time. Now on to the next story. Story 5. Today I betrayed my daughter. I feel horrible, but I couldn't handle keeping it in any longer. For those that don't know about my previous post, my daughter, a couple of months ago, confided in me that she was having an affair with her best friend's husband. For the sake of the post, we will call my daughter Savannah, 26, and her best friend and husband Elizabeth and Stan. My daughter told me about the affair a couple of months ago, and I was devastated and hurt that my daughter was so capable of doing this to someone, let alone her best friend. Given Elizabeth just had a baby, I thought I got through to Savannah, and she told me she would stop seeing Stan and would eventually tell Elizabeth the truth. I stupidly believed her because she stopped talking about Stan, and she told me she was seeing someone else. Well, until yesterday afternoon, Savannah came over to drop off my granddaughter because she was going on vacation. I didn't know who she was going with, but when she dropped off my granddaughter, I peeked outside of my front door, and she waved bye to me. But I noticed she was in Elizabeth's car, and I thought that was odd given I thought she told Elizabeth everything. And I looked really closely, and Stan was in the driver's seat, and my stomach dropped. I just went inside and closed the door with my granddaughter in shock. And I was just extremely devastated that my daughter doesn't simply care about what the hell she is doing. Yesterday night, I couldn't sleep. I went on Facebook and was on Elizabeth's page, and the more I looked at it, the more worse I started to feel because just the day before, Elizabeth made a very heartfelt birthday post to Stan. Now, look in the comments. There's my daughter Savannah commenting, "I love you guys so much. That was the straw that broke the camel's back for me." I debated to message her on there, but I just felt like it would be cowardly on my end to do that, and that she deserves a face-to-face. Elizabeth is a yoga instructor, so I went to her class this morning. I waited until after everyone left for us to talk, and I just told her everything. She initially didn't want to believe me until I showed texts from my daughter, and then we compared our finds on our iPhones, and wouldn't you know it, they were in the same exact spot. She, of course, broke down and was shaking immensely. I tried my best to comfort her, and we talked for well over 3 hours. She told me everything makes so much sense and that she wasn't going crazy. I just felt extremely terrible for her the whole time. By the end of our conversation, she told me not to tell anyone we had this conversation, and I'm honestly still confused by that because she didn't vocalize that she was leaving him or staying with him. So I'm not sure what she will do. So who knows? She might go mask off and expose everything or quietly file for a divorce. So now I'm at home hoping and praying I did the right thing. My biggest fear is that my daughter will find out I ratted her and then not let me see my granddaughter anymore. But I can't no longer allow my daughter to go through life without being checked for her actions, because this isn't the first time she has done this. Now on to the next story. Story 6. Am I wrong for cheating in the past when I was 18 and in my first relationship? I accepted a kiss from another guy. I had been dying to get out of the current relationship I was in for a while. We had broken up once, but I felt bad when he showed up on my doorstep crying and begging for another chance with me. So I apprehensively settled, and we went back to dating. After I'd gotten really tired of the relationship, I felt horrible for letting it drag on for so long. I had decided to meet my boyfriend at the time in person that Monday and finally break up with him. The Friday before, my friend, her boyfriend, and I went out to eat together. They spent the whole night joking about him and I being a thing after my planned breakup. I found it odd, but I liked the attention. Later that night, his girlfriend was joking about him kissing me, and he ended up doing it. I kissed back. I hadn't broken up with my boyfriend at the time as this was happening, so it was cheating, and I felt horrible. I tried to rationalize it with the fact that I was basically breaking up with my boyfriend soon anyways. I know it was wrong, but at that moment, I just wanted to make myself feel better. I know dragging on a relationship I didn't want to be in and then cheating was wrong. I've been in a couple long-term relationships since then and have learned how to exit them whenever I'm losing feelings instead of cheating. And I haven't come anywhere close to doing something like that again. I feel like I've learned from my first relationship and really established ethical boundaries that I didn't know I would struggle with so much when I was a teenager. I didn't know how to turn that ex away when I was emotionally disconnected. My dilemma now is my current boyfriend. I had never told anyone about the fact that I cheated before, and I pretty much blocked it out. My current boyfriend has been cheated on in the past, and I'm trying to figure out ways that I can reassure him, provide him security, and be as honest as possible with him. That kiss at 18 came to mind recently for another reason entirely, and last night I ended up telling him about it because I felt like I was withholding information from him that he would want to know considering his past. I thought that it should be up to him to decide if he still wants to be with me. He's now extremely conflicted because he believes that once a cheater, always a cheater, and I feel awful like I'm destined to cheat. I've never labeled or thought of myself as a cheater at all, so this realization after outgrowing the denial makes me feel like I'm a bad person or at least determined to be perceived as one by others. I feel like that's in my past, and I've completely outgrown my lack of backbone and integrity at the time. It's something I particularly value now. Am I wrong and a bad person for what I did in the past? I want to hide that part of my life entirely because I don't feel like it's a true reflection of who I am at this point in my life. I'm worried about the impact it will have on my current relationship or any I go on to have in the future. Now on to the next story. Story 7. My gold digger stepmother threw a temper tantrum at the reading of my grandmother's will, and immediately after, got embarrassed in front of everyone. My stepmother is a very entitled person, to say the least, and she has never seen eye to eye with any members of the family. She was my father's rebound, just 2 months after the passing of my bio mother, and the whole family was very surprised to see him move on so quickly. My stepmother, in her 3 years of being with my father, has gone on to try to ban the mention of my bio mother in the house, gotten herself banned from my uncle's place for getting drunk and picking a fight with my aunt over religion, and become widely accepted as the black sheep of the family. Her and I certainly do not get along, and we are always kind of staying away from each other, only interacting when absolutely necessary. I mean, how can you be on good terms with a woman who will yell at you for saying the name of your dead mother? It's also become very apparent to us that she is a gold digger of a high level, and for some reason, it only appears to be my father who is unable to see this. I have tried proving this to him many times, only for him to call me rude and disrespectful. You see, my stepmother loves gold and diamond rings. The first time my father proposed to her, she said no because the ring didn't cost 5 figures. Another thing that is a huge point of contempt was the relationship between my stepmother and grandmother. They never got along, and that was no secret. They both openly talked about how much they disliked each other throughout the years, with my stepmother even calling my grandmother a bitch during Christmas once. However, about 6 months ago, my grandmother was diagnosed with terminal cancer and told she is maybe half a year to live and will be lucky to see the holidays. And just like that, almost overnight, my stepmother's behavior changed drastically. She went to calling and texting grandmother daily, making sure she was okay, showing up for surprise visits with medicine and chocolates, and even offering herself to be my grandmother's caretaker. Being no fool, my grandmother saw right through my stepmother's act. You see, my grandmother was a very rich woman, and this was no secret in the family. Everyone knew that her nest was fat, and my stepmother wanted as much as she could get. The 6 months throughout which my grandmother's health kept deteriorating, I saw my stepmother acting so concerned for her, even going as far as breaking down and crying at a family gathering because she was so sad that her grandmother was going to die. What she didn't know, however, was that Granny was planning to ruin her. She has already suspected my stepmother of doing this for her own interest, but what I sent her previously only confirmed to her that my stepmother was up to some shady tactics. You see, a few months ago, I managed to eavesdrop on a phone conversation between my stepmother and her best friend, and my stepmother was quietly complaining about how she has to take care of the old hag, but that the will would all be worth it in the end. I ended up audio recording it and showing it to my granny. So, when Granny ended up ultimately passing away just a few days after Christmas, the entire family gathered around for the reading of the will, done by Grandma's lawyer. The will was immaculate. We all knew that Granny had some money, but we had no idea it was this much. Essentially, most of us got enough money to get through college, and some of us got very expensive and timeless jewelry, too. The thing is, as the will kept being read, one thing became obvious, and that was that my stepmother was nowhere to be found. The entire time, my stepmother's face was seething with anger, and with each name that was called, she got more and more angry. The will ended without a single mention of my stepmother other than $1 that was given to her as my grandmother's way of saying, "Thanks for acting like a part-time caretaker." My stepmother threw a tantrum when the will was done. She was literally crying about how she spent so much time caring for Granny and got nothing in return. She then, in a fit of rage, proceeded to call us all ungrateful PP heads, and blame us because we ended up with a lot and apparently never did anything for her. She went to leave when the lawyer spoke up again, and this time what he said got her attention. Turns out, my granny had left a letter to my stepmother, which was read aloud. My stepmother hoped that the letter would leave her with fortunes or something along those lines, but all she got instead was a long explanation of how she knew that the caretaker role was all an act to get money out of her. That granny knows without a doubt that my stepmother has already thrown a tantrum over the will, and if that wasn't enough to show everyone how much of a gold digger my stepmother was, my granny also put a CD into the envelope. We played the CD and it was my recording which I gave to her. The recording exposing my stepmother's true intentions. We all sat there, eyeballs directly at my stepmother, who proceeded to dart out of the room as soon as she realized what she was listening to. However, the way the room was positioned made it impossible for her to leave without walking by everyone. So her leave, which took about 30 seconds, was extremely awkward and even funny to watch. Update. My gold digger stepmother threw a temper tantrum at the reading of my grandmother's will, and immediately after, got embarrassed in front of everyone. So, in the aftermath of my grandmother's absolute badassery, it became clear to my stepmother that she was not very much wanted in the family. The only person who stuck by her, unsurprisingly, was my father. He went out of his way to send a personalized text message to every single member of the family who attended the will, 13 people. Defending my wife's actions, simultaneously berating my late grandmother for pulling something so sly and backhanded, and telling everyone that if they wish to say something to his wife, then they're going to have to go through him first. This was the first ever huge fight I had with him. Even when my step-monster tried to ban the mention of my mother's name, I never turned to him for help, as I justified my stepmother. But this time it was different. He was going out of his way to defend a person who has been cruel and hedonistic, even two-faced, and at the same time, he stands against his late mother-in-law, who was the mother to his first love. We ended up getting into a huge screaming match about his text to the family, and he ended up telling me that if I don't like my mom, I can pack my stuff and get out. He referred to that woman as my mom, and I asked him not to say that. He shrugged at me and said that he was technically not wrong. I exploded at him, asking him how a man can be so spineless. I told him I'm 16, but I'm still more of a man than he will ever be. He may be bigger and older than me, but at least I have the nerves not to let a gold digging which disrespect my dead wife, my son, and my mother-in-law. Maybe that was too far, but in the heat of the moment I meant it and I still do. Needless to say, I was kicked out and I'm now staying with my cousins, who have all cut contact with both my stepmother and my dad. Today, I messed up by getting frustrated after being asked the same question 3 times by my wife and letting that frustration show. So, I got home from work around 8:30 in the morning. I put my stuff down, fed the dog, and sat down to join my wife in the living room as she watched YouTube. She offered to let me watch something, but I was fine watching whatever she wanted to watch. I didn't say it, but my reasoning was that I didn't want to watch anything because I was most likely going to fall asleep after having been awake all night long. She was watching courtroom judges berating dumb lawyers. It was pretty funny. I told her that I was fine watching whatever she wanted to watch. I started falling asleep, which is something that just happens after a 10-hour overnight shift. I get up, take a shower, come back, and sit down. She offers me the remote to watch whatever I want, and again I said whatever she wanted was fine. She puts on a Game Grumps compilation. Cool, I like Game Grumps. I introduced her to them. We watch. I start to fall asleep again. I fight to stay awake, but I'm losing the battle. She makes some coffee and I have a cup. She sat back down and again told me to watch what I wanted to. It was here that I got frustrated and said, for the 3rd time, and I held up 3 fingers like a jackass, "I'm fine, watch what you want to." She fell silent and retreated to her phone. I could hear her sniffling. She was crying. She left the living room and went up to the front room where she works from home. She told me not to go up there. She started watching YouTube on her work computer. Now, I'm alone in the living room with the TV to myself and feeling like a complete jerk. Now on to the next story. Story 8. My parents had an open marriage, messed up. I hadn't spoken to them for 4 years. I found out when I was around 12 that my parents liked to play around, if you can call it that. I didn't get what that really meant until I was around 14. Anyway, I kept my mouth shut and focused on myself. I moved out when I was 18, and we have barely spoken since. I ended up becoming very insecure. I struggled when it came to dating any girls and was alone for most of my teens. Mom and Dad were this perfect couple that was well liked by everyone. All I can remember is how alone I felt during that time and was too afraid to speak to my parents about how I felt. They were always smiling and seemed to have the perfect marriage while they saw other people, and I felt alone and miserable. They used to go on weekend trips and I was alone for many weekends. They rarely brought me along for vacations, and I ended up being on my own when they did as well. I struggle with depression and started seeing a therapist and am on antidepressants right now. I just felt like I didn't matter to my parents at all and see no real reason for why I should talk to them now. I have not celebrated Christmas with them or been at home since I was 19 because I honestly have nothing but bad memories from living with them. I just felt like I was in the way. I'm not sure what I should do here. My emotions are all over the place. I don't think they know I struggle with depression. Update August 4th, 2021. I tried posting this earlier, but yeah, some other things have also happened, so I wanted to add that as well. I decided to write a letter, but it ended with me using that letter as a reference for what I wanted to say to them instead. I wrote the letter and actually just planned to drop it in their mailbox and let them read it, but honestly, after so many years, I needed to have the conversation with them, so I did. So I went home, and surprise, surprise, Dad and Mom had a friend over, the woman who I ran into a few days ago. Let's call her CLA. They were just sitting in the living room talking. I asked CLA politely to leave because I needed to speak to my parents. She said sure and left. My parents understood I had something to discuss, and they did not argue. Apparently, they were talking about me, and Claire actually came over because she was worried about me after I basically ignored her the other day when I ran into her. I sat down with my parents and had the letter I had written, and they understood I had a lot to say. The whole thing was weird. I sounded like a prosecutor trying to convince a jury of all my parents' wrongdoings. It ended up being a 40-minute indictment of my parents. I went through all of it. How alone I felt, me struggling with depression, me seeing a therapist on antidepressants, me feeling since I was 11 that I was always in the way, that I never mattered to them, and that other people were always more important. How Claire, who was 25, the same age I am now when she started hanging around with you, actually gave more of a damn than you did. How you, Dad, yelled at me when I messed up the settings on the dishwasher while you were away. I was 11 and did not know how it worked, and that I offered to wash them by hand, which I did. I was bullied in school and was socially awkward, had no friends, and was always alone both at school and at home. I was 11 and had to deal with being alone on the weekends. Even Christmas was weird and awkward. I remember seeing families light Christmas trees in our street, seeing parents and their kids, but you guys went to your Christmas get-togethers and only on Christmas Day were you home, and I honestly felt alone then as well. I have no such memories or felt any belonging whatsoever, and now you keep asking me why I have barely spoken to you for 4 years. I don't know you and you never bothered to get to know me. Other people were always more important. When I found out and understood what you guys were into, I was even more mad. Why was that more important than me? How is it fair that you are happy and I am alone and miserable? It's not fair because you did this to me. I have spent my childhood alone, my teens alone, and now my 20s alone so far. I never had a girlfriend because I struggled to trust people and have no idea how to get close to people. You shared a picture of me on FB, one of the few of us together from when I was a kid. Saw Claire and your other GF comment on it. How cute I was and what a great family we were. Notice anything on those pictures? I never smiled. Why did you even have me to begin with? Clearly, I was just a prop for you to show off to let others know what great parents you were. Your FB profiles make me sick, to be honest. Dad wanted to say something, and Mom just looked stunned. And she had tears. I just got up and left, and that was that. I never yelled or called them any names. I was surprisingly calm. I honestly felt numb walking out, but also a lot lighter. I left my spare key to their place and just walked back to my place. Mom has been texting and tried calling me. I think they are both struggling on what to say to me. I just demanded they remove the pictures of me from their FB, which they did. They do not get to pretend to the world like they were great parents anymore. I refuse to be a prop. So that's the update. Still going to continue with my therapist or may need to find a new one. Update 2. Just wanted to give an update and thank you for all the comments. I decided to switch therapists, and the new one is better than my old one. Still dealing with anxiety and feel very lonely sometimes, but trying to get through the day. Had a long talk with Mom, who actually decided to stop by my place. She and I talked for almost 3 hours. I decided not to berate her and instead just be honest and explain how my life has been and how I am dealing with a bunch of things. It was as honest as it could get with me, basically just sharing how I was doing. Mom did not realize how bad it was, and she just gave me a hug. I don't know why, but that helped. She was not sure what to say about everything, and I don't really blame her. She said come home for a while, especially at Christmas. You don't have to sit in your apartment alone. I told her I would think about it. Mom looks like she finally realized that I had been in pain for quite some time, and her recognizing that is, I guess, what I really wanted, like she finally got it. So yeah, progress, I guess. Still not sure what the future holds. Still feel very apathetic, and my anxiety can get the best of me sometimes, and I have had days I feel very low, like nothing matters anymore. But I guess it's a step in the right direction. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.